Hey, Kylie here. First things first, Allison and I are both alive. Thanks for the tips and thoughts. I've been a bit busy, so sorry for the late update. Secondly, to the prick that sent me the angry DM because he couldn't find me in Greenbrier, Michigan. Wrong state, asshole. Someone suggested Allison should buy a gun. She can't really. She's only 19, so she can't own anything semi-automatic or a handgun in this state. But I can. I told the guy I wanted something that could handle a bear. I might have lied about a trip to Alaska anyways. After test firing a few, I settled on a 10mm gun. He called it a 2-stack. So instead of 8 shots, I have 16. I wanted something that I could use to protect us because we went right back to work. I know it sounds crazy. Jordan insisted. And it makes sense. People still need to be able to contact 911. Chuck and Andy can only handle it on their own for so long. With Allison's parents still in Europe, she would be safer at the call center than alone at home. The police department had a cruiser sitting there as well. And I'm glad they did because this town is going crazy. Did you guys know you can buy a gun, pass the background check, then you have to wait 10 business days to pick it up? Not ideal when you're in a situation where you might be attacked at any moment. Luckily, I have friends. I won't say who, but someone lent me a Glock. He made me go to the range with him 3 days in a row before he would let me take it home. But that's still better than what the gun shop is requiring. Like I said earlier, we went back to work right after the attack. Jordan basically said show up on time or be fired. And since I have a mortgage and like eating, here I am. On the bright side, the doors are back in place. The gate has been fixed and now closes. Oh, and there's a patrol car parked across the driveway. So I'm actually not feeling too bad about coming back. Allison was a little bit more reluctant, but when the alternative is staying home alone, she quickly agreed to come in. A few of you brought up some good points. How did the killer lumberjack find Allison? Why was Jordan so calm in the face of death? I don't have an answer for either. Maybe he heard her voice on the phone, or he's following her? I don't know. Jordan is an enigma himself. I don't hate him like my coworkers do. I'm not a fan of him either, but then after he stood up for us like that. I don't know, his past is pretty blank, and he's super quiet about his personal life. But there's one thing that happened. So I came in to work with Allison. Just like normal, Jordan was in his office, and then the stars aligned. Allison was on a call with a very unhappy resident concerning their missing groceries, and Jordan went outside. I don't know if he's ever gone outside during a shift, or even used the restroom. Anyways, his office was left unattended. I don't know what came over me. I rushed over to Jordan's office. A quick glance at the monitor showed he was outside walking the perimeter of the building. His desk was mostly bare. 2 call reports lay on one side and a notepad on the other. The notepad was blank, but lots of pages had been ripped from it. The first drawer I opened was filled with reports. I glanced at the monitor again. He was rounding the 3rd corner. I didn't have much time. The second drawer on the right-hand side was locked. Shifting my focus to the left-hand side, I opened the bottom drawer. The only thing inside was a black leather book. Jordan was entering the lobby. I flipped through a couple pages. Names, nothing but names. They all had green or red lines through them. I heard the first MacLeod door open. I turned and rushed back to my stall and put my headset back on. I let out a shaky breath just as Jordan entered. He walked to his office, paused, turned to look at me for a moment, then went in his office. I hadn't recognized any of the names. I googled a few that I could remember, but didn't get anything solid. I'll have to bide my time and try again later. I would say I'm pretty friendly with everyone at Greenbrier PD and FD. I'm probably closest with one of the newer officers. Dean has been with Greenbrier PD 3 years now. Dean and I grab drinks at the diner occasionally. I wouldn't say we're dating, we just hang out one-on-one from time to time. One of these times, they had a $2 Long Island iced tea special. $38 later, we were sloshed. There was no way either of us was going to drive. My house isn't far from the diner, so we stumbled our way there and crashed on the couch. This wasn't uncommon. We'd often sleep off the night, him on the couch and me in my room before heading our separate ways in the morning. But something was bothering Dean that night. He was uncharacteristically quiet. I asked him about it once we were settled in. At first, he didn't want to talk about it. Maybe the alcohol loosened him up, or maybe it was just the vibe we had going that night, but he told me his story. Did you see that boat being towed past the diner as we walked out? I shook my head. I hadn't noticed any boats, but I wasn't exactly looking either. Dean leaned back on the couch. That was a 21-foot 1972 Starcraft Star Chief. He stared at my ceiling quietly. I responded tentatively, unsure of what brought on this somber mood. I wasn't aware you were a boat guy. A small laugh died on my lips when I saw the tear running down his cheek. I wasn't a good kid in high school, he began. Not like drug use or anything like that. I was just super edgy and thought I was too cool to be friends with other kids. Looking back, I was just a dick for no reason. I barely graduated. I think they just wanted to get rid of me, really. After that, I enlisted, not because of some sense of duty. I didn't want to work, and the army seemed like a way to make money, and I thought it would make me look cool. You would think that that would straighten me up, but instead I spent 6 years doing the minimum. I never left the country, and when it came time to re-up, it was made clear to me that I shouldn't, so I went back home. I squandered my GI Bill on some dumb online college classes. By this time, my parents were about done with me. They told me to get a job or get out of the house. They would support me for 3 more months, and then that was it. Dean smiled at the memory. I tell you what, at the time I was pissed. Now I can see they had way more patience than I deserved. Anyway, that's when I applied to be a cop. There was a shortage, so I had no issues getting in. I'll skip all the boring parts. What changed everything for me happened on a rainy October day. I was mad before I even arrived at the call. A simple domestic disturbance. A homeowner called to report someone on their property. I was the rookie, and it was raining, so I got sent out to deal with it. He paused for a moment, the memory weighing heavily on him. I arrived at a very nice beach house. The homeowner was a lady in her 60s. She was polite enough. She explained someone had beached their boat in front of her house and was acting weirdly. I made my way to the backyard, sure enough. Just a dozen feet off the shore was a ragged Starcraft, and attempting to push it into deeper water was a gaunt-looking woman. She was probably in her early 20s, but the soiled clothes and sunken skin made her look older. She had that trademark erratic movement about her that all tweakers have. It wasn't uncommon. Drug addicts would often acquire boats and live in them for a moment. Oftentimes they would sink or, like this one, get stuck somewhere. And that was my first mistake. I assumed she was just another junkie. I yelled at her to come ashore. She ignored me and kept trying to push the boat. The tide was going out. She was never going to move the boat until it came back in. I yelled a few more times, but she wouldn't listen. I radioed in and they told me to figure it out, so I walked through the knee-deep water, absolutely livid. My boots and pants were soaked with seawater. She kept screaming about how she needed more water. I tried to grab her, but she ran around the boat. I chased her in circles a few times, cussing her out the whole time. She had this illogical panic about her. She kept pleading with me to listen, but I was done listening. Ask, tell, force. That's what I had been taught when it came to non-compliant suspects. She wouldn't stop running, and she was a good deal faster than me, so I pulled out my taser and popped her. She went rigid, just long enough for me to grab her. It was like giving a cat a bath. She screamed and clawed. She begged me to let her go back to the boat. I didn't listen. I dragged her inch by inch to the beach. By this point, she was sobbing and begging me to let her go. I wouldn't. I threw her onto the beach and loaded another cartridge into the taser. I didn't need it though. She lay on the beach convulsing, her eyes so wide and filled with terror, I thought they would pop out of her head. Dean sniffed and wiped another tear. I had spent so many years fantasizing about being a hero, you know. I wanted to be the guy everyone respected, maybe even feared. I wanted to be the guy that stopped people from hurting others. Instead, I stood over the body of a terrified girl. She died right there on the beach. Coroner said it was likely a fear-induced heart attack. She had been scared to death. I never got in trouble for it. I wanted to. I got real low after that. I planned on leaving the force and probably leaving this life, but I didn't. I couldn't. If I left after that, her death would have meant nothing. Instead, I started to dedicate my career and my life to helping people. Every day I try to be the best I can, to pay back that unpayable debt. Dean, surely you can't blame yourself for someone overdosing. Even if you lacked any empathy, it's still not your fault. He didn't look away from the ceiling when he replied. It wasn't an overdose, Kay. She had nothing in her system, no signs of any use at all. This town isn't the only place with weird occurrences. It's funny I had started to feel like I had atoned in a way. Then that boat went past, all I could see were those dead eyes looking up. I don't know what unfathomable terror she was running from, but I wish I had taken the time to listen. We went to sleep after that. Dean drifted off with his head on my lap. I didn't want to disturb him, not after that trauma dump. When I woke up in the morning, he was gone. I thought about our conversation. It didn't fit the Dean I knew, but I had only known him a couple years. Maybe the happy-go-lucky guy I knew really was a total dick in his past, but it wasn't who he was now. I don't know, I feel like this town pulls troubled people in. Things are escalating. It used to be we would get a couple unexplainable calls a month. Then they became nearly every week. Even when we got multiple a week, I wasn't scared. I always had that degree of separation. I don't have that safety net anymore. It's not just Allison and the lumberjack either. I think I'm being targeted. We were about to finish up our shift. Allison was pretty upset. She had received a no-info distress call. It happens sometimes, and it's horrible every single time. She had answered the phone like normal. Before she could say anything, a female voice screamed in mortal terror. The phone went dead mid-scream. You know how when you're applying a tourniquet, there's that difference between bleeding and bleeding out? Screams are like that. There's the screams of fear that we hear all the time. Then there's the type of scream that you know the person doing it didn't survive. It's a real punch to the gut. Allison followed protocol. She dialed the number back, but it wouldn't go through. She tried all her options, and nothing worked. The caller was gone. It was time to report it and move on. The poor girl was clearly haunted by the event. I suggested we go for a walk before heading home. Something to help leave work behind. Allison wasn't super into the idea, but I insisted. There was a trail on the far side of the town. It was wooded, but only a little. It basically was a patch of trees near a pond, with a playground nearby. Lots of people would be there, so there would be little chance of running into trouble. Just to be safe, I texted my plan to my friend on the police force, and he assured me he would be close by. The trail was a small 2-mile loop around the pond. Allison watched the joggers go past longingly. I miss not being scared. I want things to go back to normal, she said. I couldn't help but agree. I know what you mean. It's like everyday things get a little more chaotic. We walked up the small incline into the wooded portion of the trail. Allison seemed to be more relaxed. Nature looked to be doing her some good. I got that unwelcome prickling feeling. My pace slowed, and Allison noticed. "What is it, Kylie?" She had a look of acceptance on her face, like weird shit was the new normal. "I don't know, something just feels off." Allison looked around. The trees looked normal. The birds flittered from branch to branch. She turned around. "I'm out. Let's go home." I agreed. We walked uphill in the direction of the parking lot. I stopped. Allison looked at me again. "What's up?" I looked over my shoulder at the uphill stretch behind us. I shook my head. "Nothing, just a trick of the light, I guess. Let's just go." So we walked up the hill into the wooded section of the trail. This time, it was Allison who stopped. "Okay, maybe I'm crazy, but isn't this the wrong way?" She was right. We needed to go back to the parking lot. Somehow we had gotten turned around. "No, you're right," I confirmed. "We need to be going the other way." So we turned and started walking uphill into the wooded section. I had a headache coming on suddenly. It was making it hard to focus. Allison grabbed my arm roughly, pulling me to a stop. "Kylie, we're going the wrong way." Ahead of us was the uphill stretch leading into the wooded section. Panic was rising within her. She looked around us frantically. "Kylie, what the heck is going on?" My head felt like it was splitting in half. I couldn't focus on my surroundings. "Okay, enough of this." I pulled out my phone and called Dean. The phone beeped at me before shutting off. Great, just great. I resisted the urge to throw it in the pond. Let's continue into a single direction for 100 steps, then see if that gets us anywhere. Allison agreed to try it. I found myself unconsciously leaning on Allison. Her red hair kept blowing into my face. I turned my head to get the hair out of my mouth, and for just a second I thought I saw something. Maybe someone moving through the woods to our right. I looked closer and saw nothing. Allison said 100. Okay, now what? I shivered. The air felt cold. Kylie. That was 100 steps. Did we keep going or turn back? Behind us, I saw the downhill portion of the trail was getting absorbed by a thick mist. I tugged Allison forward, suddenly no longer needing her support. "Let's go." Allison was shivering as well. It had been hot when we left the car. Both of us were dressed in t-shirts and shorts. A breeze drifted from behind us. It was so cold. I gasped as its icy fingers dived into my lungs. Our walk had become a fast jog. Deep down I knew that mist was bad. I could tell we didn't want it to touch us. Allison grabbed my hand and pulled me off the trail. I followed her as best as I could. We burst out into a small clearing. The sun was out again. Birds were singing into the trees. I was bent over trying to catch my breath. Allison stood there soaking the sun. In the lighting, she looked different. Her pale skin made her red hair appear to be glowing in contrast. When she turned to help me up, I almost recoiled away. For just a moment, her eyes had appeared black, but they weren't. They were still the same dark brown as before. "Look," said Allison, as she pointed to a gap in the trees. Just ahead was the playground. I could see and hear kids playing joyfully. With a little more caution than was probably necessary, we approached the playground. I could see our car and the parking lot next to it. Everything was normal again. No mist, no never-ending hills, no figures in the woods. We went straight home. I took a shower and then Allison picked Princess Bride from my movie collection. I'm still on edge. I contemplated calling Dean, but at this point, what good would it do? Grabbing a blanket, I settled in on the couch with Allison. Something bumped downstairs. I sat up instantly awake. Allison continued to snore softly beside me. We had fallen asleep during the movie. My house is tall and skinny. The ground floor had the kitchen, bathroom, and entryway. Upstairs, where we currently were, had 2 bedrooms and a small living room area. I carefully climbed up from under the blanket, doing my best to not wake Allison. She stirred slightly, but her breathing remained rhythmic. I wasn't sure if I'd heard something, and I really didn't want to scare her with a false alarm. My bare feet moved silently across the soft carpet. I opened my bedroom door. I lifted up on it so I wouldn't squeak. On the headboard of my bed lay the borrowed Glock. Taking it in my hand, I checked for the glint of brass. It was ready to fire. I stepped gingerly onto the stairs, the sweat on my hand compromising my grip on the gun. The ground floor was pitch black. For once I hadn't forgotten a light on. The occasional passing car offered flashes of illumination. Blood rushed through my ears, creating an artificial roar in the silence. My heart beat hard as I set foot on the cool tile of my kitchen. Sweeping left to right, I checked the small house. Reaching the front door, I tested the knob. Unlocked. I couldn't remember if I locked it or not. The house was empty. I breathed a sigh of relief. Except for the basement, I hated myself for thinking about it. I had only gone in a couple times in the years I had lived here, just to take out and put away seasonal decorations. I opened the door. The darkness below made my unlit house look like a sunny day. It was as if existence itself ended just past my feet. I stepped into it. The old wood steps creaked with each footfall. I blindly felt around for the string that dangled from the single light bulb at the bottom of the steps. Finding it, I pulled down. Click, the light came on. Its dim, yellow light chasing away the shadows for a moment. The basement was divided into 2 rooms. The floor was dirty and damp, the walls and ceilings unfinished, exposing the inner guts of my home. The first room was empty and bare. I moved through it quickly. The second room was filled with junk from the previous owners, as well as myself. Stepping over boxes and ducking under various hanging items, I made my way into the room. The dust looked undisturbed. Finally, I could return upstairs and go to bed. The light turned off with a pop. I let out a little squeak of surprise. Clutching the gun, I desperately tried to make out anything in the dark. It was hopeless. Then I heard it, what sounded like the soft exhale of air. Dread crept up my back. Again, a soft exhale. Extremely close to me. I was sweating buckets. My legs started to tremble. The room is empty, I told myself. It is just your imagination. Exhale. Calmly walk back to the stairs. There's nothing down here. And if there was, you would fuck it up. The gentle caress of cold air on my neck shattered my bravado. I ran for the stairs. Things crashed all around me. I scrambled over idle items. I imagined the icy hands of some long-dead monster racing for me. I crashed into the concrete wall. Where the fuck are the stairs? My shin collided with something hard, sending a bolt of pain up my leg. I felt over landing on the bottom step. Frantically, I crawled to the top. Sliding on the tile floor, I kicked the door shut behind me. I was a mess. My hair was filled with cobwebs, and my breathing was coming in ragged gasps. Stomping over to the kitchen drawer, and I pulled out a flashlight. Next, I turned on every downstairs light. I opened the basement door, flashlight in one hand and gun in the other. The room was as empty as before. With a false sense of bravery, I checked the rest of the basement. It was empty. It had been so real in the dark. It was burnt out rather than turned off. Finally, after multiple checks, I settled down in my bed for the night. It took me a long time to fall asleep. Allison and I are working nights pretty steadily now. Things are continuing to be weird. Just this morning, evening, night shift. So around 5 p.m. today, I was heading to my car to go to work when I noticed something. The neighbor's house looked off. The front door stood open. The paint looked aged. I would have guessed it was 10 or more years old rather than 2 years I knew it to be. I hadn't paid much mind, but now that I looked, the driveway was cracked and the lawn a mess of tall weeds. The place seriously stood out on the street of manicured lawns. I didn't have much time to worry about it. The last thing I wanted to do was be late for my shift. Allison got in the car and we made the short drive to the call center. The next day I paid more attention to the neighbor's house. Someone must have reported them to the HOA because the place looked totally transformed. They must have gotten the work done while we were sleeping the day away. Mark has been a total drain. Just this shift we had a raccoon in a delivery truck, mime twins skipping down the street pinching people while holding hands, voices coming from a storm drain, and just now, a call from a parent that claimed Peeping Tom had been looking in their daughter's window. Except when the squad car arrived, they found the window was on the second floor with nothing near it. Unless he had a ladder that left no marks or had Spider-Man'd his way up to the wall, there was just no way a pale-faced man had been grinning through the window. Regardless, there would be extra patrols in the area for the next 2 nights. Speaking of which, the police department hired 2 more officers. They were finally nearing full strength again. Hopefully there won't be any more bridge incidents. But that's not what I'm here to post about. Allison had to meet with a sketch artist at the police station, so we had driven to work separately. It seemed like the perfect time to see just how long Jordan stayed at work, and maybe see where he went afterwards. Sitting in the car was incredibly boring. I nearly nodded off a couple times. I was mid-text with Dean when Jordan finally stepped out of the building. It was 2 hours into day shift. In comparison, Nick never stayed more than a minute or 2 past his shift ends. Jordan walked north into town. I had never noticed because he was always there before me and left after, but Jordan didn't seem to drive to work, not even in our wet winter months. I would have to be careful trailing him. Honestly, he was the most boring person to follow. He entered the grocery store. I stayed 3 lots away. He left with a paper bag. He sat on a park bench for a bit looking at his phone. Then, to my surprise, he entered the bar. I casually walked in myself. I was there often enough, I figured I would blend right in. I was wrong. Jordan sat at a booth facing the door. He had a deadpan look on his face. He gave me the come hither finger. I obliged. It was a polite thing to do. I sat across from him. Before my butt had made comfortable contact with the seat, Jordan spoke. "What are you doing, Kylie?" I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Just going about town. Came here for a drink. What brings you here?" Jordan's eyes bored into me. "Would your actions today have anything to do with you looking at things on my desk?" I suddenly felt too warm. I knew I was blushing and it sucked. I could never lie very well. "I needed a pen," I lied. Jordan looked annoyed. "Cut the crap, Kylie. Are you with them or just dumb?" I was both insulted and confused by this question. "Screw you, Jordan. You and your dumb book of names." I stood to leave, but he grabbed my wrist. It hurt. "Watch yourself, Kylie. The best thing you can do is get out before things get bad." I ripped my hand free. I stared at him as I massaged my wrist. The front door banged open loudly. 2 men in buzz cuts strode in like a pair of roosters. Their military look might throw some people off, but nearly half the residents in Greenbrier sported buzz cuts as boys and ponytails as girls. They all drove nearly identical Tahoes, Explorers, and Chargers without tabs on the plates. It was kind of like an unspoken bit of knowledge that they all worked at the building in the woods, even if they denied it when asked. Jordan stood and stepped past me. This close, I noticed he hadn't shaved today. His entire appearance was a bit more ragged than normal. "Listen, Kylie, I don't hate you. Just the thing you represent. You know what to do." With that, he left. I was more confused now than ever before. The bar continued to fill despite the early hour. I wasn't in a mood for whatever morning celebration was starting, so I went home. I'm really confused, guys. Jordan's face wasn't just unshaved, which is unusual. There was no cut on his cheek. To be continued.